My name is Alina Vance, and I just turned 18. At my birthday dinner last night, my father leaned over, clinked his glass, and whispered in my ear, "When the guests leave, you're going to sign some transfer documents for your Uncle Marcus. Just a quick formality." I smiled. I nodded. Then I quietly slipped away to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and transferred the deed and assets of my grandparents' multi-million-dollar estate into an irrevocable trust, just as a safety measure. By the next morning, my parents and my younger sister woke up to discover that the lakeside property, the savings, the investments, everything was locked behind an impenetrable legal barrier. My father's face went completely pale. My uncle, who had already signed a contract to sell land he didn't legally own, was frantically calling his legal team. Before I tell you what happened when the dust settled, welcome back to their secret stories. Please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. Drop your city and local time in the comments below. I absolutely love reading where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back 6 years to a humid summer afternoon at Blackwood Ridge, when my grandfather told me something I didn't truly comprehend until last night. The summer I turned 12, my grandfather, Arthur Vance, picked me up in his dusty blue Ford truck and drove us 40 minutes out to Blackwood Ridge. The cabin sat nestled deep in the woods, shaded by ancient hemlocks so thick they barely let the midday sun through. The front porch had a slight tilt. The screen door squeaked on its hinges. The air there always smelled of dried cedar, old leather books, and a sweet, earthy scent I could never quite name. "Grab the other side of this timber, Elle," Grandpa said, hoisting a heavy cedar rail. I did. We spent the entire morning replacing 3 rotted posts along the western boundary. He never rushed me. Instead, he showed me how to test for decay by pressing my thumb into the grain of the wood. If it gives under your weight, it's done. Inside, Grandma Alina had cold lemonade and roast beef sandwiches waiting on the heavy oak dining table, the very table Grandpa had built with his own hands the year they were married. Later, she sat on the porch rocking chair, patting the seat beside her. We sat in silence, watching the lake ripple until the light shifted from bright blue to a deep amber gold. "This ridge stays in our family," Grandpa said that night, brushing sawdust off his worn trousers. But family isn't always defined by blood, Alina. Family is whoever actually shows up for you. I didn't fully understand what he meant back then. I was only 12. I thought he was just being reflective. He was. That entire summer, I went out to Blackwood Ridge every single weekend. I learned where the old water pump leaked, which window frames swelled in the humidity, and how to bleed the copper radiators before winter. In October, Grandma Alina taught me to arrange her library by publication year because she said it gave the room a sense of history. Grandpa walked me along the property lines, pointing out the old iron stakes he'd driven into the earth himself. I had no idea back then that my grandfather was already in deep consultations with a trust attorney about this exact property and about me. Back home, the atmosphere was entirely different. Our house in Oak Ridge was decent. 4 bedrooms, a perfectly manicured lawn, and a garage my father used as an office for his struggling commercial glass business. It was decent, but it was cold. My sister, Chloe, who was 10 at the time, had the largest bedroom, which had just been fully remodeled. Lavender walls, a designer study lamp, custom built-ins. My room, on the other hand, still had the faded wallpaper from the family who lived there before us. At dinner, my father would constantly bring up the ridge. My father's place is just sitting out there, rotting away, Robert said, cutting his meat. The property taxes alone are eating us alive. We need to liquidate it and put the cash into something that actually yields a return. My mother, Clara, nodded. It's the only logical move. Grandpa told me the cabin stays in the family, I murmured. Robert chuckled. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but it was incredibly dismissive. You were a kid, Alina. He was just telling you stories. Nobody's keeping a money pit for sentimental reasons. Nobody asked my opinion after that. The conversation quickly shifted to Chloe's gymnastics tournament. She won a silver medal, very prestigious. Clara had already framed the certificate on the mantelpiece. I had won the county science fair 2 weeks prior, but my blue ribbon was still crumpled at the bottom of my school bag. After dinner, as I cleared the plates, I noticed a glossy pamphlet half hidden under a grocery list on the counter. Summit Crest Realty. Premium lakefront developments. Currently acquiring acreage. In the margin, there was a handwritten phone number in a tight, aggressive script that didn't belong to my father. I placed the flyer back exactly where I found it and walked upstairs. Sitting on my bed, I pictured Grandpa's oak table, the one he built with his bare hands. The table where Grandma would place my plate without me ever having to ask, because she already knew exactly what I liked. Then I thought about the glossy corporate flyer downstairs. They were already measuring my grandparents' sanctuary in dollar signs. Grandpa Arthur passed away 2 years later when I was 14. The service was held on a damp, foggy Tuesday. Gray clouds, wet grass, and green folding chairs that sank slowly into the sod. I sat in the second row, clutching his old green handkerchief frayed at the borders, smelling faintly of pine shavings. At the wake, I noticed Robert and his brother Marcus standing near the back corner, whispering. Marcus had a thick folder tucked under his arm. Robert kept nodding, his jaw tight. I caught one brief fragment of their conversation from Marcus. We need to push this through probate before the estate fees pile up. They were planning the sale of the cabin at his funeral. I said nothing. I was 14. I had no leverage, no legal standing, and absolutely no clue that my grandfather had already anticipated this exact scenario. 2 more years passed. turned 16. Grandma Alina fell ill in the spring and was gone by the time the summer heat set in. The last time I visited her in the hospital room, her grip was surprisingly solid. "The ridge is yours, Alina," she whispered, her eyes locked onto mine. "Do not let them dismantle it. Promise me." "I promise, Grandma," I said. She squeezed my hand one last time, closed her eyes, and let go. After her funeral, another bleak, gray afternoon, Robert sat at our kitchen table and looked at Clara. "Now, we can finally clear up the title on that land." He said it with a massive sigh of relief, like a heavy burden had finally been lifted. That very evening, Marcus called. I heard my father pacing in the garage, his voice echoing off the concrete. "Yeah, absolutely. Let's get the paperwork drafted. The sooner we close, the better." His voice sounded lighter than it had in months. Standing in the darkened hallway with a glass of water, a cold realization settled in my chest. My grandmother's passing wasn't a tragedy to them. It was a clearance event. I didn't shed a tear that night. Instead, I made a firm decision. I just didn't know how to execute it yet. Between 16 and 18, the cabin became my quiet, unspoken sanctuary. Every Saturday morning, I drove out to Blackwood Ridge in the beat-up sedan I bought with my tutoring money. I patched the screen doors. I replaced the weather stripping. I cleared the dead branches off the tin roof, remembering Grandpa's warning that standing dampness is what destroys a structure. At home, the vocabulary shifted. The cabin stopped being Grandpa's place and became the family asset. Robert used the phrase casually, as if it had always been theirs. Marcus started showing up for Sunday dinners almost every week, always carrying manila envelopes or keeping his laptop open to regional land listings. Once I tried to intervene. What about Grandma's wishes? She wanted me to keep the place. Clara set her glass down gently, using her soft, maternal tone. "Your grandmother was very confused and emotional at the very end, sweetheart. This is a business matter. Real life doesn't run on sentiment. Business, that was the word they used to overwrite everything that used to be love." By the time I was 17, Robert became more overt. "Once you turn 18, we're going to handle this property transition together. As a family." The way he said family made it clear that my opinion was entirely irrelevant. One chilly November afternoon, while clearing out the linen closet at the cabin, I found a sealed envelope tucked behind a stack of mothballed blankets. My name was written on the front in Grandma Alina's elegant cursive. Inside was a single, high-quality business card. Beatrice Sterling, attorney at law. Below her name, in crisp print, it read, "The Vance Legacy Trust." My hands began to tremble, not out of anxiety, but out of absolute relief. Grandma had left it there knowing I would eventually be the one cleaning out those closets. Not Robert, not Marcus, me. I slid the card into my wallet. I didn't make the call. Not yet. 3 months before my 18th birthday, Beatrice Sterling called me. The call came on a cold Thursday evening in February. I was in my room working on a calculus assignment when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar local number. Alina, this is Beatrice Sterling. I was your grandparents' estate attorney. Her voice was calm, measured, and entirely professional. I need to speak with you before your upcoming birthday. There are matters regarding the estate you need to understand, and our window is closing. She instructed me to meet her the following Saturday at her downtown office. I went alone. Beatrice's office was small, lined with dark mahogany bookshelves, smelling of rich espresso and old paper. She sat across from me and opened a thick file. Your grandparents retained my services 6 years ago, she explained. They established an irrevocable trust. The Blackwood Ridge property, a diversified investment portfolio, and a primary savings account. The total valuation is roughly $2.3 million. The trust holds all of it, and you are designated as the sole successor beneficiary. The room felt like it was spinning. My grandparents had bypassed everyone to leave me everything. They transferred the assets into the trust while they were still living. Beatrice continued, sliding a deed document across the desk. Legally, these properties never entered their personal estates. They do not go through probate. Your father and your uncle have absolutely no legal claim to them. The title to the ridge was officially registered under the trust's name 6 years ago. Your father simply never checked. Why didn't they tell him? I asked quietly. Beatrice paused, taking off her glasses. Your grandfather told me specifically. My boys will have that land listed on the market before the funeral flowers have even begun to wilt. The office fell dead silent. I stared at the legal documents bearing my name. There's one more thing, Beatrice added. My office flagged several informal inquiries regarding the Ridge's title registry over the past month. Someone is digging. I became hypervigilant after that meeting. I didn't act differently, but I watched everything. The following Sunday, Marcus came over. After dinner, he and my father retreated to the garage. The side door was left open just an inch, enough for their voices to carry across the gravel driveway. I've already finalized the preliminary purchase agreement with Summit Crest for $480, Marcus was saying, his tone sharp and urgent. But we need a clean, unencumbered title before the closing date. Robert, how are we handling this? A quitclaim deed, Robert replied, his voice muffled. Mom and Dad are gone. We are the natural heirs. We sign the quitclaim to ourselves, register it at the county office, and execute the sale. Who's going to challenge it? Is that entirely clean? Robert asked, sounding slightly hesitant. It's standard procedure for inherited land, Marcus insisted. Nobody looks twice at a family transfer. It's a done deal. There was a brief pause, then Robert spoke quieter. What about Alina? Marcus dismissed it instantly. She's 17, Robert. She has zero legal standing. By the time she turns 18, the sale will be finalized and the land cleared. She'll get over it. We'll set aside 40 or 50 grand for her college tuition. She should be thrilled. I backed away from the door, my chest tight, my fingertips cold. Marcus had already signed a binding contract with a massive development firm for nearly $500,000 on land he didn't own, held in a trust he didn't even know existed. That night, I sent a brief text to Beatrice. They are moving up their timeline. Her response came almost instantly. I anticipated this. Meet me Saturday morning. We will have everything prepared. I closed my phone and stared at my ceiling. In the adjacent room, Chloe was laughing at a video on her tablet. Downstairs, my parents were cleaning up the kitchen, talking about their summer plans. And in Marcus's briefcase, there was a real estate contract that was already legally worthless. He just had no idea. On Saturday, Beatrice laid out the entire strategy on a legal pad. The Ridge's title is secure within the trust, Beatrice explained. If Marcus attempts to file a quitclaim deed, the county clerk should technically reject it because the chain of title won't align. The property hasn't been in your grandparents' individual names for 6 years. However, if he submits falsified supporting documents, like an invalid affidavit of heirship, he could succeed in placing a cloud on the title. It wouldn't give him legal ownership, but it could freeze the property in litigation for years. So how do we stop him? We act first, and we act with precision. Beatrice pointed to a date on her calendar. The exact day you turn 18, you are legally recognized as an adult. You can formally execute your acceptance of the successor beneficiary role. The moment you sign, I will file a lease pendens, a formal public notice of pending legal interest, at the county registry first thing the next morning. That completely freezes the title. Nothing can be recorded against it. I nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Just show up, sign the verification, and let me handle the filing. I sat with the weight of it for a second. Should I confront my parents? Beatrice looked at me over her reading glasses. Your grandparents hired me to protect you, Alina, not to negotiate with people who are actively trying to bypass you. When I returned home, Robert was unusually cheerful. Great news, sweetheart. We're hosting a big family dinner for your 18th next Saturday. It's a major milestone. He smiled, Clara smiled, even Chloe cheered. I smiled right back. My father was planning my birthday dinner. My uncle was preparing to liquidate my inheritance. And I was sitting at the table, letting them believe their timeline was running perfectly. I have to be honest with you. Keeping quiet during those final 9 days was one of the most agonizing things I've ever done. Part of me wanted to confront them right there in the kitchen. But Beatrice was right. If I tipped them off, they would have found another legal loophole to tie up the property. So I waited. Before we move to the day of the confrontation, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to keep a massive secret to protect yourself, even when every instinct told you to scream the truth? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to their secret stories so you never miss an episode. 5 days before my birthday, Clara sat next to me on the sofa. She used her soft, deeply practiced, adult-to-adult voice. "Now that you're turning 18, Alina," she began, "there are some major family decisions we need to navigate together." The word "together" felt entirely hollow. The Blackwood Ridge property is becoming an immense financial strain, she continued. The taxes, the insurance, the constant upkeep. Your father's business is facing some very serious debt. If we sell the land now, we can clear the business liabilities and set up substantial college funds for both you and Chloe. Grandma wanted me to keep the cabin, I said quietly. Clara's expression hardened for a split second, the warmth evaporating before she forced a tight smile. Your grandmother was sentimental, Alina. But sentiment doesn't pay the county tax collector. Robert walked in right on cue, as if they had rehearsed the entire entry. I've already spoken with a highly reputable buyer, he said. It's an incredibly fair offer. Who is the buyer, Dad? He hesitated, blinking. A regional development firm. Marcus has a connection there. Summit Crest. I'll think about it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Robert patted my shoulder, visibly relieved. That's my girl. I knew you'd understand. Later that evening, Chloe knocked on my door. She sat on the edge of my mattress, picking nervously at the seams of her blanket. Alina, Mom and Dad have been whispering in the kitchen late at night. They sound tense, like they're hiding something. Is everything okay? I pulled the covers up around her shoulders. Don't worry about it, Chloe. It's going to be fine. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Marcus cornered me in the driveway as I was bringing in groceries. He leaned against his SUV, wearing his signature real estate agent smile. Hey, kiddo, got a quick minute? Just wanted to chat. We sat on the concrete steps. Marcus leaned in close. Listen, Alina, that lakefront lot is worth about $480 on the open market. I've negotiated an incredibly fast close with a developer I trust completely. And I've made sure you're taken care of $50,000, cold hard cash, strictly for your college expenses. I let the figure sit in the air. 50,000 out of nearly $500,000. Marcus smiled, treating me like a naive child. 50 grand is a massive head start for someone your age, Alina. Most kids would jump at an offer like that. Whose name is currently on the deed, Uncle Marcus. The smile on his face faltered for a fraction of a second. A tiny, cold calculation flashed behind his eyes before his professional mask slipped back on. Your grandparents, of course. But since they've passed, the property naturally reverts to your father and me as the surviving heirs. That's not how property law works, I said, looking him dead in the eye. He knew it, and I knew it. He was a licensed broker, he knew the law. But he was betting everything on my ignorance. I'll think about it, I repeated. Marcus stood up, dusting off his slacks. Don't overthink this, Alina. Opportunities like this don't wait around forever. As he drove away, I saw him pick up his phone before he even cleared the driveway. That night, I sent Beatrice a message. They're finalizing the paperwork. She replied, hold the line, 3 more days. The night before my birthday, I drove out to Blackwood Ridge alone. The lake was completely still, reflecting a silver crescent moon. The hemlocks stood like dark, silent guardians against the night sky. I walked up the creaking porch steps and sat in the chair next to the empty one that had belonged to my grandfather. The air was sharp, smelling of pine needle resin and coming rain. I opened my laptop. Beatrice had emailed the entire digital document package, the formal acceptance of successor beneficiary, the trust asset verification, the designation confirmation. All of it was flagged with digital signature fields. At exactly midnight, I read through every single line twice. Then I closed my eyes and listened to the wind rustling through the hemlocks. Patience isn't weakness, Alina. It's timing. I used to think Grandpa was just talking about his fishing trips. The tears came suddenly, and I didn't try to stop them. It wasn't a breakdown. It was just a quiet release of the grief and betrayal I'd been holding inside. I cried because I wished my family was different. I wished my father was the kind of man who would have taught me how to fish on this lake, rather than calculating its square foot commercial value. I wished my mother had asked me what I wanted, instead of telling me what was practical. But tears don't hold up in a court of law. Signed trust documents do. I wiped my face, locked the cabin door, and drove back to Oak Ridge. I set my alarm for 11:45 p.m. the following night. In less than 24 hours, I would turn 18. At 11:50 p.m. on my birthday, my bedroom door was shut tight. The house was silent. My parents had gone to sleep an hour prior, and Chloe's lights had been out since 10. I logged into the secured video portal with Beatrice Sterling, who was sitting in her home study, surrounded by stacks of legal briefs. Are you ready, Alina? She asked gently. I'm ready. The moment the clock strikes midnight, you are legally an adult. You will execute the document, and the trust will officially activate under your direct control. At exactly 12:00 a.m., I signed the digital acceptance form. Excellent, Beatrice said, her voice crisp. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, I will be at the county recorder's office to file the lease pendants. The moment it is stamped, the title is completely locked. If your uncle attempts to submit any transfer documents, they will be flagged and rejected immediately. What if they tried to file something yesterday? I asked. The system would have rejected it automatically because they aren't the registered owners. The title has been held by the Vance Legacy Trust since 2020. I looked at the confirmation screen. My name was now listed as the sole primary beneficiary. Downstairs in his duplex across town, Uncle Marcus was printing out documents. I only pieced this part of the story together later from the county clerk's report and my father's eventual confession. While I was signing my acceptance at midnight, Marcus was preparing a forged quitclaim deed, falsifying my grandparents' signatures, and applying an unauthorized notary stamp. He called Robert at 11:30 p.m. Everything is set. We file at 9. I want to make sure Alina is distracted with her birthday morning before we head to the office. Are you absolutely certain about this, Marcus? Robert had asked. They're dead, Robert. We are the next of kin. It's simple. It wasn't simple. It was fraud. Marcus had already signed a binding purchase agreement with Summit Crest Realty with a strict closing window. If he failed to deliver a clean title, he faced a massive $48,000 breach of contract penalty, plus potential damages. He had bet his entire career and financial stability on the assumption that my grandparents had left their estate unprotected. My birthday celebration began at 4 the next afternoon. About 20 people filled our living room, neighbors, church friends, and a few of Robert's former business associates. Martha Finch, a close friend of my grandmother's who lived near the lake, was there too, watching the room with sharp, intelligent eyes. There were balloons, a banner, and a large vanilla cake. I smiled, accepted the small gifts, and played the part of the grateful daughter. In my pocket, I carried a printed copy of the trust activation. Robert stood up near the cake table, tapping his glass with a spoon. The room went quiet. I just want to thank everyone for coming, Robert announced, putting his arm around me. Alina is officially an adult today. Clara and I are so proud of her. And as a family, we have some incredibly exciting news about our future. He looked at me with a wide, expectant smile. Right, Alina. Every eye in the room turned to me. Thanks, Dad, I said, keeping my voice completely level. That's all. Robert's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly laughed it off and raised his glass. As the guests mingled, I noticed Marcus standing near the hallway, furiously typing on his phone. Martha Finch slipped over to me, smelling faintly of lavender. Your grandmother would be very proud of you, Alina, she whispered. I saw your uncle at the ridge last week with 2 men in expensive suits. They were measuring the shoreline. He was acting like he already owned the soil. After the cake was served, Robert stood up again. This time, his voice was louder, commanding the room. Before we conclude the evening, I want to share something personal. As many of you know, my business has faced some incredibly difficult setbacks recently. But my parents, Arthur and Alina, left us a beautiful legacy, the property at Blackwood Ridge. And as a family, We have decided to liquidate the property to secure our collective future. The words felt incredibly heavy. He was announcing the sale of my grandmother's sanctuary in front of 20 witnesses, using social pressure to force my compliance. He looked directly at me. Alina understands. She knows this is what's best for all of us, don't you, sweetheart? The room was completely still. Clara added, "It's what a responsible family does. We support each other." I set my plate down on the table. The clink of the porcelain was incredibly loud in the silence. "I never agreed to sell the cabin, Dad." Robert's smile remained frozen, but the color began to drain from his face. "She's just joking. Birthday nerves." "I am not joking," I said, my voice steady and clear. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes burning. "Alina, this is hardly the time or the place." I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and set it down. "You're right, Uncle Marcus. This isn't the place." The place was the county recorder's office at 8 o'clock this morning. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. Suddenly, Marcus's phone began to vibrate violently in his pocket. He didn't answer it. Within 20 minutes, the party was completely over. The guests made hasty, incredibly uncomfortable exits, sensing the absolute storm brewing inside our walls. The moment the front door clicked shut behind the last neighbor, Clara turned on me, her face flushed with anger. "Do you have any concept of the financial ruin your father is facing, Alina? We could lose this house, the home you sleep in, and you are clinging to a holiday cabin you visit on weekends." "I visit it because it's my home, Mom. That is completely irrelevant." Clara slammed her hands onto the kitchen counter. "We are a family. We make decisions together. If you actually cared about this family, you wouldn't have gone behind our backs to hire a lawyer." I froze. "How do you know about my lawyer?" Clara didn't blink. "Marcus found a business card for Beatrice Sterling in your school bag last week." "Who is she, Alina?" My stomach turned not from fear, but from the disgusting realization that they had been going through my personal belongings, searching for leverage. Before I could speak, Martha Finch's voice cut through the kitchen doorway. She had stayed behind. "That girl has every legal right to consult an attorney, Clara. Alina wanted her to have that property, and you know it." "This is a private family matter, Martha," Clara snapped. Martha looked at Clara, then at me. "Alina was my closest friend for 40 years. I know exactly what she wanted." With a supportive nod to me, Martha quietly let herself out. Now it was just the 5 of us: Robert, Clara, Marcus, Chloe, and me. Robert closed the kitchen door and sat down heavily at the table, folding his hands. "Here is how this is going to play out, Alina. Tomorrow morning, Marcus and I are going to the county administration building. We are filing the transfer. The land will be sold. You will receive a fair share, and we will move past this." "What exactly is my share?" I asked. $50,000. "And what is the total sale price, Dad?" Robert remained silent. Marcus spoke up from the doorway. Don't ruin your future over this, Alina. I looked at my father. And if I refuse to sign anything, Robert's expression turned cold. If you choose to fight your own family, you are completely on your own. No financial support for university, and you will find another place to live. The kitchen was dead silent, save for the slow drip of the faucet. You are threatening to exile me on my 18th birthday, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I am asking you to stand with your family, Robert replied. I stood up, pulling the printed trust document from my pocket and placing it flat on the table. I am standing with the family, Dad. The family that actually kept their promises. I walked past Marcus, past Chloe, who was crying silently on the stairs, and went straight to my room. Robert believed his deadline was 9:00 a.m. the next morning. He had no idea that my attorney had already finished the job at 8. The next morning at 8:00 a.m., Beatrice Sterling was indeed the first person through the doors of the county registry. She filed the Vance legacy trust deeds and the Lee's pendants notice. At 8:14 a.m., my phone rang. It's officially recorded, Alina, Beatrice told me. The title is completely flagged. Any conflicting document they attempt to file will be automatically rejected. I sat at the kitchen table, calmly eating my breakfast. Robert and Clara were moving silently around the house, preparing for what they thought was their victory run. At 8:30, Robert and Marcus left together, Marcus clutching his leather briefcase. We'll be back before noon, Robert said, not looking me in the eye. Good luck, I replied. At 9:05 a.m., Marcus and Robert walked up to the county recording desk. Marcus confidently slid the forged quitclaim deed across the counter. The clerk scanned the parcel number, looked at her monitor, frowned, and typed again. I cannot record this transfer, sir, she said. Marcus leaned in. I'm sorry, why not? The title for this property is held under the Vance Legacy Trust, registered in 2020. Furthermore, a lease pendens was filed on this parcel at 8:00 this morning. This quitclaim deed does not match the legal ownership of record. Robert stepped forward, his voice rising. That's impossible. Our parents owned that land. According to the public record, sir, the deed was transferred to the trust 6 years ago. I suggest you contact the named trustee, Beatrice Sterling. Marcus's face drained of all color. The name of the lawyer they had found in my bag was now stamped on the public record of the property they had already contracted to sell. You told me this was a simple transfer. Robert hissed at Marcus. I didn't know about any trust, Marcus stammered. You're a licensed broker, Marcus. How did you not run a basic title search? The clerk tapped her desk. Gentlemen, if you have a dispute, I must ask you to take it outside. Beatrice Sterling, who had stayed in the waiting area to witness the event, watched them leave without saying a single word. The call from my father came at 9:22 a.m. "What did you do, Alina?" Robert's voice was shaking with pure rage. I could hear the highway traffic in the background. "I accepted the legacy Grandpa and Grandma left for me," I said calmly. "You conspired against your own parents with some random lawyer. Beatrice Sterling has managed their estate for 6 years, Dad. You just never bothered to ask." "That is my parents' land," he shouted. "I am their son." "They didn't bypass you because they didn't love you, Dad," I said, keeping my voice entirely steady. "They bypassed you because they knew they couldn't trust you with it." The line went completely quiet. I heard the wind blowing through his phone line. He hung up. My phone buzzed again an hour later. It was a representative from Summit Crest Realty, Adrian Thorne. "Miss Vance, we have an active purchase contract with Marcus Vance for the Blackwood Ridge property. He guaranteed a clean title. We've just been notified of a legal freeze on the parcel." "My uncle does not own that land, Mr. Thorne," I said. "He never did. The property is owned by an irrevocable trust, and I am the sole beneficiary." There was a long pause on the other end. He represented himself as the sole legal heir. "I understand that, but representation does not equal legal title. I suggest you take this up with your own legal counsel. Is there any scenario where you would consider selling directly to us, Miss Vance? We are prepared to make a highly competitive offer. The ridge is not for sale." I see Thorne's voice went cold. "Then we will be pursuing our legal remedies against your uncle for misrepresentation and breach of contract." Summit Crest filed their lawsuit against Marcus within the week, demanding the $48,000 penalty, plus an additional $60,000 in damages and legal fees. Furthermore, the county clerk's office flagged the forged notary stamp Marcus had used on the quitclaim deed. An investigator was assigned to the case. Because of the active criminal inquiry, Marcus's real estate license was suspended indefinitely. His entire career was effectively over. Robert returned home that afternoon, looking entirely defeated. He sat at the dining room table, staring at his hands. "I'm going to lose the business, Alina," he said, his voice entirely hollow. "The bank is calling in $180,000 in outstanding commercial loans. That cabin was our only lifeline. I'm sorry about the business, Dad, but the cabin was never yours to sell. You're 18, he snapped, his voice cracking. What does an 18-year-old need with a multi-million-dollar estate? It's not about what I need. It's about what they wanted. I'll contest the trust in court," Robert threatened. My phone was sitting on the table, the line open with Beatrice on speaker. "Mr. Vance," her voice echoed through the room. "Contesting an irrevocable trust established 6 years prior to the grantor's deaths, with documented mental competency and independent witnesses, will cost you more in legal fees than your entire business is worth. I strongly advise against it. Robert looked at the phone, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw him truly look at me, not as a child to be managed, but as an independent adult. In the weeks that followed, the fallout settled over our family like heavy dust. Marcus was forced to take out a personal high-interest loan to settle with Summit Crest to avoid further litigation, and he still faced potential criminal charges for the forged notary stamp. Robert ended up selling his commercial glass business at a significant loss, barely satisfying his debt to the bank. The house in Oak Ridge was saved, but their savings were completely gone. Clara took a job as a pharmacy technician to help cover the bills, the first time she'd worked in over 10 years. My parents and I didn't speak for nearly a month. The silence in the house was absolute. One morning in late spring, I drove out to Blackwood Ridge. The dogwood trees were in full bloom, casting white petals onto the dark surface of the lake. I unlocked the front door, using the key Grandpa Arthur had given me when I was 14. In the desk drawer on the porch, I found the personal letter Grandma Aliner had left for me. She wrote that she knew her sons would try to liquidate the land. She didn't harbor hatred for them. They were her children, and she loved them. But she understood that Robert and Marcus only saw the world in terms of transactions. She chose me because I was the only one who cared to learn how to preserve the cabin, rather than asking what it could be sold for. The final line read, "Keep this sanctuary safe, Alina. It has always kept you safe." Beatrice called me later that week with one final detail. In addition to the property, my grandparents had established a separate educational trust fund containing $50,000, which had grown to over $58,000 over 6 years of interest, the exact amount Robert had offered me as my share of the sale had already been set aside for me years ago. Quietly and securely, I enrolled in the environmental science program at the local state college that week. The campus was located just 20 minutes from Blackwood Ridge. I filled out my student housing forms, and for the first address in my adult life, I wrote down the address of the cabin. It felt like coming home. I asked Robert and Clara to meet me at a quiet coffee shop downtown on neutral ground. "I love you both," I told them as we sat around the small wooden table. "And I need you to understand that what I did wasn't out of malice. The cabin is not for sale. It will never be for sale. If we are going to have a relationship moving forward, it has to be built on honesty and respect, not on guilt, and not on the assumption that I owe you my inheritance." Clara started to protest, but Robert quietly stopped her. He stared into his coffee cup for a long time, then gave a single, slow nod. "I don't know how we repair this, Alina. We don't have to fix it today," I said, leaving enough money on the table to cover our drinks. "I'll call you on Sunday." On a warm afternoon in May, Chloe came out to the cabin. She brought a box of pizza and sat on the porch rocking chair beside me. "I didn't know they were trying to steal it from you," she said softly, looking out at the water. They never told me. I know, Chloe, you were just a kid. None of this was your fault. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and we sat in silence as the sun slowly set, painting the lake in shades of gold and amber. We didn't talk about the lawsuits, the trust, or the anger. We talked about her school, the lake, and how we were going to rebuild the old dock during the summer. I didn't win against my parents. There is no real victory when the people who were supposed to protect you turn out to be the ones you have to protect yourself from. But I kept my promise. And for the first time in my life, I am standing on solid ground. If you are listening to this and you feel like you are completely on your own, I want you to remember, sometimes the people who are looking out for you aren't standing right in front of you. Sometimes they built a shelter for you years ago, quietly, without saying a word. All you have to do is survive long enough to claim it. Thank you for listening to their secret stories. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next episode. Of course, I want to hear from you. If you had to protect one sacred promise in your life, what would it be? Let me know in the comments.